Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Dev Chat here at Privateer Press for Wednesday, March 11th, 2020. I'm Will Hungerford. I'm the lead developer of Privateer Press. With me is my boss and master, William Oz Schoonover, development manager.
Don't touch your face.
Don't tell me not to do that.
The only thing I'm going to do today is give out medical advice.
Sorry for the late start. Tony, our video producer, who you all know, who puts the streams on every week, great guy. Tyrant of a man, though. If he doesn't have his coffee right, which we have to make for him, he throws it at us, and we have to redo it. So after 5 redos, we finally got it right, and you can't see the scalds, but we're good to go.
Wow.
So, we today...
I was going to make a really dark comment, but I didn't.
We stream at least twice a week, every week. On Wednesday, Dev Hangout, which is what you're watching now. Always Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific. That's where we talk about the games we make. Warcaster, War Machine, Riot Quest, Monster Apocalypse, and any other cool things we've got going on. Thursdays is Get Your Paint On with Jordan Lamb, where Jordan paints the miniatures that we make, goes over hobby tips and tricks, and basically answers any hobby-related questions you have. And then our 2 semi-regular shows, Staff Showdown. We just had one yesterday. Where we get on and play live battle reports for you to watch and cheer and or boo your favorite or most hated staffers.
Yep. We're playing another one a week from this Friday, so the 20th, toward the end of the Kickstarter.
It's more Warcaster?
I believe so.
Sweet. Yeah. I'm down. Is it us?
Well, I don't know who's playing, but the rumors are that Continuum models might make an appearance.
Oh, sweet. That'd be awesome.
So yeah, Jordan's painting some studio stuff right now. I think that the Scourge is going to get painted on the Get Your Paint On tomorrow, I think is the plan now.
Come join us then and find out.
Yeah.
And we do the Hobby Hangout, which is Danny Samuel and Brian McLaughlin show, where they go over how to do conversions, build terrain, and do tips on building your miniatures and cleaning them.
Magnetize your models, whatever.
Tony had too much coffee, as we saw, skipped ahead just a little bit. And hey, look, we take subscriptions on Twitch, if you didn't know. If you subscribe, you get a subscriber badge, you get special emojis. The more subscribers we get, the more stuff we unlock. We just unlocked the Riot Quest loot coin. The next one will be the center up emoji. For those of you that are fans of the Get Your Paint On, yelling center up at the painters so their models appear on the camera is a favorite pastime of most of the viewers.
And Tony, whenever that gets created, you have to make a physical printout of it and put it on the mat so that they have a centering up place. So yeah, we'll get a lot of use out of that art whenever it's finished. And we're really close to those subs. And remember, you can always use your Twitch Prime, Amazon subscription thing. Click a button, it's free. It just gives us money, and we like it.
Yes, we do.
Screwfizzle or somebody subscribed this morning.
Speaking of things we like Mini Crate, and it would seem that a lot of people out there like Mini Crate too.
Well, we love this Mini Crate.
We do. The current Mini Crate for War Machine is the Gremlin Spring Break Party, available for 8 more days. You can sign up and get one sent to you, and if you do a 6-month subscription to Mini Crate, you will get the special VIP model 00 Debray, Secret Agent Debray.
Yep.
Over on the Legend of the 5 Rings, we have a new model. Shiba Sukune has just come out. She's available until April 5th. And if you're looking to do a 6-month sub, you will also get the VIP model for that line, which will be Tengu Sensei. And finally, on the Savage Mini Crate, Valyria is available until tomorrow. Tomorrow being the very last day you can sign up and get her. If you do a 6-month sub, you will get Red Sonja in your next order. And of course, before we talk about today's topic, we have to mention the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So Warcaster kickstarted a week ago yesterday, a week ago today. Yeah, it was during the Dev Chat.
During the Dev Chat.
A week ago today, we funded during the Dev Chat last week. We're now over 300K. In fact, last time we checked, we're at 324.
Yeah, 324, and it was over 500. So like 324, 520 or something like that. So really close to that first hero model.
Yeah,
which can work for multiple factions. Wojtek Sudal, the bounty hunter.
Do you remember what the level we have to hit is to unlock?
325.
325.
Yeah.
Sweet. So, if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely go check it out. If you have people that might be interested, if you're looking to build a community, let your friends know, share it. And of course, if you've got local retailers, there are retailer pledges they can get on. We know a lot of people have actually been pooling their money and giving it to their local retailer and having them do the pledge and having it sent to the store. That way, not only you're getting all the cool models, but you are having a community built in as soon as you get back.
The other thing about that is we have one last micro stretch goal, which is, I think, 300 retweets of the original announcement.
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot more people who watch this show than 300 sometimes.
Yeah.
So it should be really easy to get that. but we're just not quite there yet. So if you haven't turned on your Twitter that you hardly ever check, go to that original announcement, retweet it, and let us unlock that last. I think it's a wallpaper or something for your computer.
Sure.
I think. The other thing
I have no idea.
The other thing I want to throw in schedule-wise, if you cannot get enough of us, the two of us right here, right now, doing this kind of thing. We were just on the D6 Generation podcast yesterday.
Yes, and I was on Spellstorm Miniatures podcast right before.
And then I've been on Crippled Systems and More Than Dice in the last 2 Sundays.
Yeah.
So
we're doing the circuit.
There's a lot of us available in at least audio and sometimes video form out there if you need more.
Yeah, D6 is a great listen, and it was very fun. And that's a show that's been around for quite some time.
Yeah,
It's always been awesome. So you can find them, and then I guess if anyone's like, were there any spoilers? I will say that on the Spellstorm Miniatures podcast, I did give a spoiler about the Wastelander. I don't know if they made that one live yet. It should be soon. I know the D6 one is live now. Ooh. So let's go to today's topic. So what we're doing today is there's not going to be any new rules, no new information. Just get that out of the way up front. What we want to do is actually have a developer chat.
Yep.
Since most people are going to begin this game with the command starter boxes that you can get on the Kickstarter, and those rules are all available on warcaster.com. You can go see the full rule book, all the cipher cards. You can see those models' rules, the current in playtest rules, and then even rules beyond that. But we haven't sat down and just had a conversation with everybody to talk about our favorite tactics, our thoughts, our uses, and sort of our insight on those models and different Warjack weapons. So what we're going to do today is basically go through the command starter PDF. For those of you who haven't seen the rules, you get a chance to take a look at them. And for those of you who have, we're just going to have a conversation about what we think about everything and some of our favorite uses of them. So get comfortable, put your favorite hot tea going, put your feet up, and let's just sit back.
Can I put my feet up?
You can't. You're too big. And let's just sit back and have a chat. So shall we begin?
Sure.
We're going to start talking about my faction.
Oh.
The Iron Star Alliance.
Sure. We can't.
So
I haven't played my faction yet publicly in the live streams. It's sad.
The turn is continuing?
Yeah. It's sad.
Sure. So the Firebrand, the Light Warjack, you're going to get on the command starter. And it's so versatile. Now when we get to the weapons, I'm going to talk a lot about the double shield build I like.
Yeah.
But of the two Cortexes it has, I'm a huge fan of the Reflex Cortex.
Yeah.
You know, the ability to be able to move after being targeted lets you just pull off some really weird things that your opponents might not have been able to. Like if you're trying to secure an objective and prevent your opponent from getting it, and they're trying to take you off the point, and they shoot, then all of a sudden you scoop behind a building or out of line of sight, so the rest of, say, a squad can't get to it. The Jack Hunter one, I usually take that Cortex specifically if I am looking at the rest of my armament to build a Firebrand to kill other Jacks. That is its one and only purpose.
Yeah.
But I will say my favorite rule on the Firebrands with all Cortexes get is the Force Projector, which is that for every arc on it, your melee weapons go up by 1. Which all of a sudden with speed 6, this isn't including ciphers that let you go to speed 8 in flight, for example.
Yep.
With speed 6, you're looking at probably minimum 4-inch range on your melee weapons if you've got 4 arc on it. So out of nowhere, the double shield build or double fusion glaive, whatever you might be doing, is just going to walk up and just hit people out of literally nowhere. You've fought against this more than you've fought with it.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are your thoughts on Firebrand?
My favorite thing about the Reflex Cortex is the concept of it lets these guys fight against heavies in an interesting way. So a heavy Warjack, the thing about Warjacks in the game is their baseline rules say they can attack with all their weapons. So some models can do that too, some other models, but Warjacks can always do that. So if someone loads up their heavy with all kinds of melee weapons and then comes at your Reflex Cortex Warjack and takes a swing at it, it might just dodge out of the way of the rest of the melee attacks that Warjack can make and still contest the point or be in position to do what it needs to do. But sometimes you only need to move a fourth of an inch or something, and then you're like, your next melee attack can't hit me. So that dodginess isn't just I shoot you, you come at me or whatever, like we've done a couple of live streams. It can also be you're only going to get one of your attacks against me if you're coming at me with a lot of melee stuff. So you have to choose which weapons you're going to use
It also
very
makes
specifically.
most slams in the game are 3 inches. It makes them basically useless.
Yeah.
If you have the reflex cortex. If you're like, I slam you 3 inches and with a fury or an ability or whatever, if it's an attack, and afterwards you're like, cool, I just walk back. So if someone is trying to finally get you off that objective. So me personally, Firebrands, huge fan, double shield, and then one of the shoulder cannons of some kind. But let's actually look at their weapons, starting with my personal favorite, the repulsor shield. Cheap as dirt. It's the cheapest weapons you can have because there's no zero cost weapons. So cost 1. The shield bonus is cumulative. So you're looking at +2 if you have it.
It's not the most powerful melee weapon in the game. It's only a 2, but
math-wise, it's mat 4. So if you get 3 arc on it, you're rolling 4 whites, 3 reds. Your chances of hitting over the defense, you're not going to really probably put any holes in jacks with the shields.
Yeah.
But like your basic squad or a solo, you hit them hard enough, then all of a sudden that 2 white and, I don't know, 4 red, 5 red, you're going to get a decent amount of damage. But I don't think that's even the big point of it. I mean, the repulsor ram is nice when it can happen, but for me personally, this lets me just put my points into a better shoulder weapon and bring my light warjack, my 2 summon point warjack up to armor 5, which is fantastic. Sean, we will be talking about the Continuum starter box here later in the show and just our thoughts on them.
yeah, but we're not going to show you any models yet because they're still being painted by the studio.
Now, if you want to go full-on melee offense and get the most out of that arc projector, you can just go double fusion glaives.
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe there's a shoulder
There's
weapon
not a 1-point shoulder option
at the moment.
but double fusion glaives is still totally worth it. I've play tested with that option, and heavies don't like it when you system failure them at all, and so it's totally worth it to have 2 POW 5 range 4 melee weapons that can system failure things if you need them to.
Yes. And system failure, which we've not seen on one of the streams we've done yet, and if you haven't read through the core rulebook, system failure is a potent continuous effect. So what it does is when something suffers system failure, you roll a d6. On a 1 through 3, the jack, it only works on jacks.
Yeah.
The jack hit can't make melee attacks until the continuous effect expires. And on a 4 through 6, it can't make ranged attacks until it expires. When the pulse round ends, you roll a white die.
Yeah, that for all continuous effects.
And basically you have a 50-50, whether you roll blanks or strikes, that the continuous effect stays or goes away. System failure, so say someone brings a heavy, someone shows up with a strike raptor, and they've got a strike raptor just built to annihilate people with ranged, right? Just to be like a bomber build. And you come up with a firebrand with fusion glaive, and you just go, boop.
Yep.
Right? Spike, roll it, go double fusion glaive. Hit it with 1, spike, see if you get the result you want. You don't, hit it with the other one, spike, see if you get it.
And the great thing about it is even if you spike, you're only sacrificing 1 of your 4 inches of melee range on that firebrand.
Yeah.
So, like I've said, I've gotten it in position where I could hit 2 heavies, and even spiking on the first one didn't drop my range to hit the second one, and they were not like touching each other. So it's a really interesting build for shutting down your opponent's warjacks, but there are ways to work around it to a certain extent.
So the assault rifle and bayonet, I will say that on the stream yesterday, I said something incorrectly. I said when you fire this, you only fired 1. You can only use 1 of its modes, the assault rifle or the bayonet. And I was incorrect looking at the notes. When you choose this weapon, you get to use all of its modes, which means you can walk up to somebody, and if you're in melee range, bayonet them and shoot them with the assault rifle, because you're able to fire with all your weapons, and apparently able to fire with all of your modes with all your weapons.
Yeah. So this weapon is not super sexy. It doesn't have any special rules or anything like that.
But it's a 2-in-1.
But it's flexibility, and like we've said in other streams, the Alliance is all about that kind of we can take on anything we need to take on, because especially melee and ranged attacks in the same turn are kind of a theme of that faction. So yeah, and it's not a bad gun. It's POW 4 and it's range 12, so it's pretty good range. It can reach a lot of stuff in the table, and then an extra melee attack if you need it. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Quick question I've seen come up, and Alec Imluda is asking on Facebook, and we were going to try to get to some people's questions if we possibly can. There's a lot coming through, but just ask. Question for us, why did we go with Monpok dice for Warcaster? One of the easiest answers is, of our systems, Of our 4 main games, War Machine, Riot Quest, Mompock, and now Warcaster, the majority of them use the strike dice system.
Yeah.
It's a proprietary system. We understand the math behind it really well. We understand the probability behind it really well. It's not hard for someone else to pick up as well if you're new to the game. And when we were looking at, we were doing opposed rolls and how we wanted the damage system to work, we looked at a lot of different options in terms of dice, whether we're going with regular 2d6s.
Yep.
But ultimately, with the opposed roll and just doing quick add-ups of strikes versus adding it to, say, I roll this, then I add it to this value, and you roll this, and you add it to this value, like traditional 2d6 plus mat versus 2d6 plus defense. There was a lot of systems we looked at, and we ended up on this one because it flowed the quickest in what we wanted to do with the game.
Yeah, when you're doing opposed dice rolls, it's easier just to say, I rolled this many dots versus your dots, than to say, well, all my dice that rolled this are successes, and all your dice that rolled that are successes, or comparing math.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also really love the difference in types of dice. So this game doesn't use the blue dice, they're part of the strike dice system, but the difference in white dice and red dice is significant. So the fact that all the base stats are white dice means you can expect what the white dice will roll, but then when a red die gets added, red dice are so much better than white dice that it skews that math in your favor a lot.
And I saw a couple questions just about people about systems failure. You can't have 2 systems failure continuous effects. You can only have 1 copy of any continuous effect on someone at a time. Now, going to the shoulder weapons. And this, for me, is where, when I'm building my firebrands, I'm usually going double shields.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to do
well,
with
not
it,
for every, if you take 4 firebrands, you're probably not going double shield on every single one of them.
Don't tell me how to live my life. I'm going double shields on every single one of them.
I still think double rifle bayonets with a good shoulder is a really awesome, super offensive build.
It is, but I like to use my Paladin Enforcers for that level of firepower. But we'll get to them in a second.
Sure.
I like to use my firebrands as objective campers that are going to walk up and just sit on a point and be really hard to get rid of with high armor. If you slam them off, they walk back in. And then when I activate them, they're going to shoot. And that's where my choice of which kind I want to go with. You got the Harbinger Cannon, where if I'm doing a build where I'm basically trying to rely on strafe and I'm worried about taking out multiple people at once with them at range, I'm going to go with the Harbinger Cannon. The Hunter Killer rounds is nice when it comes up.
Yeah, if a really important model's hiding behind a wall or something, because they let you spike to ignore line of sight and cover, so you can just basically fire the gun through things in some capacity, some sci-fi-like capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like that. If I'm bringing 4 firebrands, which I haven't built a list yet, outside of playtest, but like personal list for me where I'm running 4 firebrands, I usually will split half and half. Like all 4 will have double shields, and then 2 will have Harbinger cannons, and 2 will have one of my favorite guns in the game, the Null Cannon.
Yeah, the Null Cannon it's deceptively good for how big it is. It's just a little tiny shoulder gun. It's not a lot of the shoulder guns like the railgun is just super long.
They're massive.
Noticeably, you're like, oh, there's a giant gun on that thing. The Null Cannon's just like a little spheroid thing, but it's really powerful for what it looks like.
Yeah, and the ability that if you hit, regardless of doing damage, you just yank an arc off something, means that when you're using them as this is my preferred tactic.
Yeah.
Double shields, Null Cannon. Keeping my firebrand with a reflex cortex as an objective camper. So eventually my opponent needs to start getting gates near the objective they're coming after. And a firebrand just sitting there firing at that gate, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I hit it, I'm probably going to do a point of damage. It is POW 5, and I'll have multiple arc on it. So I'm probably going to do a point of damage just beating the flat armor of the gate. But then just that extra bit from Null Strike, right? Just like removing the extra arc is enough to usually thwart my opponent's plans. So I just love this as if you're going to come over here, you better come heavy, because otherwise you're not going to just drop a gate nearby and then start summoning. And I will try to activate them as late as I usually can, unless I need it to do something more pressing. Keep it to the end when my opponent tries to get over there and drop that gate to just mess with things.
And that's it for the firebrand.
That's all I did for the firebrand.
Yeah. Now there are stretch goals for additional weapons.
But we'll talk about those.
And that kind of stuff, but we're just talking about starter box stuff right now.
The other thing you get in the starter box if you're going to play Iron Star Alliance, which you should,
or you could choose something else. All your choices are valid.
Paladin Enforcers. Now, Paladin Enforcers are just an all-around solid unit. Decent speed, average mat rat, average defense, average armor. They're like across the board, like the level, right? I would call them the most, I want to say the most average, but that sounds bad. Just that like they're not particularly like great or terrible at anything.
Yeah.
They're just sort of like the median.
They're a very solid choice for getting almost anything done, which is what the Alliance is all about.
But their options, once you give them an arc, are where they really shine. So you can ignore cover or line of sight. I'm sorry, stealth.
Yeah.
If you spike, which again will come up time to time.
And you're basically trading your 1 red die in your attack roll versus your opponent's 2 red dice in their defense roll.
Correct. Or sometimes even the ability to shoot them at all.
Yeah.
With stealth.
So it's not like the most powerful option all the time, but when you need to take out a Weaver, I think the Immortal Weaver has stealth, and there's some other models with stealth. I almost gave a spoiler that I wasn't supposed to give yet. Have we hit that stretch goal, by the way? Anybody?
We'll figure it.
325 yet?
We'll see. We'll see.
Might say something about Wojciech Sudal when we do. Maybe.
If we hit it during the show?
Yeah.
But I was going to say, my favorite use of them is the reflex accelerator. What I want out of my squads is volume of fire.
Yeah.
You know, I usually custom build my jacks, kind of how I talked about the firebrand, and in my squads, I want them to put out as many shots as they possibly can. So I love Paladin Enforcers with the Cypher that says a unit gets to make another ranged attack during their activation. Because that way I am putting out 2 shots and potentially a melee attack out of the entire unit, all of which rolling 3 white and 1 red to make their attacks, which against other solos and other squads, or sometimes if you just roll your butt off, like this guy did on the stream yesterday.
Sometimes you roll 13.
I love these guys as just machine guns, and when I say that, I mean I know they've got assault rifles, but they can just put down so many shots, and without even a cipher card, just the ability to move 6 off 1 model, leapfrog the other 2 up, maybe get them into stab range, and then
bayonets and rifles.
Like they do so much damage. Do they survive? They're pretty good against blast damage. I usually don't use them to hold on to any kind of sort of spots, but they're my go-to light fire.
When you're playing your warjacks as defensive, just installations almost, then these are the mobile things that are going to get work done. Hey Tony, can you scroll up a tiny bit on the Facebook chat? So there's a question from Yancey about models engineering and magnetization and stuff. Ask those questions tomorrow in the Get Your Paint On, because Jordan will have just built some Scourge warjacks for the paints and stuff. So he can show you how they're engineered to go together and that kind of stuff.
And if you want to know more about magnetizing the warjacks, last week's Hobby Hangout, Brian did exactly that. So you can actually watch him
was that
magnetize.
A Duskwolf, or was it?
That was a Duskwolf.
Okay,
yes.
so he magnetized a Duskwolf. And all of the models are built so that they have swappable hard points, like the shoulder mounts for like the Scourge, how it has 2 shoulder mounts. They go on both sides. And the same thing for the Firebrand. If you've looked at the Firebrand that's on the 3D rotation, the rifle has like a disc on it, and that disc is what plugs into the arm. So that gun is perfectly symmetrical. So either like the sword, it will go symmetrical on either arm, or the shield will, but the rifle will flip back and forth because it has a little plug on it.
Yeah.
So I just want to catch that and point people at those videos and live streams and stuff if they're having questions like that.
So carrying on to the next model, I love the Paladin Weaver.
The Paladin Weaver. It's so much more than just a Weaver.
Yeah, that's the thing.
This is my Space Wizard. It throws fireballs at people. No, it does a lot more than that.
It does a ton more than that. I mean, not only, obviously, if you've got it charged, you get +5 range to your ciphers, which are already going out at range 12, because that's Arc Relay 12, right?
So it's got a 17-inch range on its Fury, which is really, really good.
It's pretty survivable. It's got normal Paladin stats at Def 3, Arm 3, and Compound Armor, so up to Armor 4. So it's a little bit more survivable than the normal Weaver, but the realignment codex and the null strike on its hammer.
Yeah, the fact that its staff isn't just an arc relay, it's also a hammer. It's a melee weapon, and it can knock arc off things, because that is a theme of certain things in the game. Most factions will have some way to knock arc off of things.
Yes.
Like we'll get to the Marcher World's version of that in a second.
And I'm, as we mentioned earlier, I'm just a huge fan of disrupting people's gates, of walking up and just...
Yeah. Now, you can only do it within 1 inch of this model, but sometimes...
That's all you need.
If your Paladin Weaver's holding an area by itself and someone drops a gate, and you can hit it with a null cannon and bop it with a hammer, then that gate might go away. And
then realignment codex, one of my favorite tactics is if I have a gate out, like I'll summon a gate the turn before, and I'll put like 2 arc on it to make my opponent think I'm not planning on putting anything big out of it, like maybe a solo or a squad, and then I'll have this guy walk over, use realignment codex, and just drop 5 into it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden put out, a heavy and a solo or 2 lights or whatever I need to come out of it.
Yeah, and this is great for supercharging Warjacks too.
It is.
Because, or just if you allocate everything the way you want it to be, but you need to shift something, or you want to not necessarily telegraph to your opponent, these Paladin Enforcers are going to have an arc on them, in 2 turns or whatever, then sometimes just spiking to put 1 arc on the models that are going to activate is still worth it.
I think that he gives you a ton of versatility.
Yeah, and that flexibility is like one of his best uses.
Yep. Over on the last model you would get if you do an Ironstar Alliance starter is the Paladin Commander, the solo. Great combat solo, has a blast weapon, which means it can by itself, if you get lucky, take out a squad, because not only will you hit the person, you hit the models within 2 inches of them. Has the same ability to make ranged and melee attacks, but in a command starter, you're probably going to use this model as just a super solo, as a combat solo.
Yeah, especially when you're playing only those 4 units in a starter, this model's going to have to get work done that a second squad or something like that would do for you in a full game.
But I feel that this guy starts to shine whenever you are playing bigger games.
Yeah.
Because the ability to take an activation token off a Paladin squad is, and when more Paladin squads come out.
Especially because we've shown off the Paladin squad, the second one has Harbinger cannons. So they're carrying large machine gun things, and they work like Harbinger cannons do. They have a strafe attack. So that means that when you're talking about firepower in your squads, that squad has a potential to make a lot of range attacks.
Yes.
And letting them activate back to back to possibly knock multiple squads of your opponents off the table is really, really powerful.
Yeah. So I feel that, like I said, when you play them in just your command starter, you'll get good use out of them, but as soon as you go up to full-size skirmish, or especially if you go up to full-size battle at 15 units, you're going to get a ton of use out of this guy. Oz, do you want to tell us about the Eternus Continuum for a bit?
Wait, it's out of order. I thought we were going to do Marchers first.
No, it's in order. It's in order of the PDF.
Okay, cool. It's just weird. So this is my favorite Warjack of any we've shown off because it has a giant crab claw. It's basically visually. I just like the idea that this model always has a big, giant, scary melee attack, no matter how else you build it, which compared to the other 2, that gives it effectively 4 weapons because it has 2 shoulder mounts and 1 arm mount and a giant crab claw.
1 second, I want to go back. I feel like I dev-brained something.
What'd you do?
And that happens. Yes, the Paladin Weaver. I was talking about holding the gate back and putting a bunch of arc onto it at the end using realignment codex. We changed it to just unit, not unit or void gate.
You can't do it to gate.
So that was something
that happens in playtest.
So that's something we were doing in playtest, and I forgot we changed it to only units. So you mentioned it's still really good on your jacks.
Oh yeah, it's super good on your jacks, or even a squad if you need it.
Yeah. So, but my bad, totally misspoke, and that happens. Like we've play tested so many different versions.
We've like I was said on one of the podcasts, we've been talking about some version of a game called Warcaster for 3 years now.
Yeah,
and we've played a lot of stuff.
So
hey, chat.
Wait a second.
Hanley in chat just says we hit 325K on the Kickstarter.
Oh, nice.
So look at that.
Thank you, everybody.
So yeah, so Wojciech Sudal is now an unlocked model. And I think we'll be previewing his rules. We were talking about previewing the rules for some of those models soon.
Yeah. All right. I'm glad I caught myself.
He's a pretty awesome model, and you can use him in your alliance or your Marcher forces.
Right.
Because
he's a wild card.
He's a wild card.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we gonna say any more about him on this show, or I'll leave that up to you?
We'll just maybe throw something out like yes, stealth or something.
Sure. So tell us more about the Scourge.
Okay. So the Scourge is awesome. So its core rule is the servo booster, which says for each arc on the model, it gains a strength and a power. So strength is going to be useful if you're playing the cipher card that lets a warjack slam something.
Right.
And there are other cipher cards in the future that use strength. So you guys haven't seen every single possibility of the using of strength. But getting +3 POW on your Wrecking Claw, which is already POW 4, making your melee weapon have POW 7, that's a lot of dice.
It's a lot of
dice.
dice.
That's only the damage, that's only the white dice from the damage roll. That's not counting any success dice, any of the red dice from your attack roll. So base 7 white dice plus more dice is a big deal.
And given how you roll, you'll take out heavies in
if
one
I'm
shot.
gonna roll 87 on those dice.
Yeah.
And then that weapon itself can spike to add activation tokens. It's got a stun module on it.
Which is so gross.
So not only can you possibly like canoper a light warjack, if it doesn't get just wrecked by that hit, you might just say, boop, now you can't activate.
Quick note for everybody who's reading the rules at home. The rules are still being updated with little things, and they're still being laid out. And there's a couple little bits of text we're adding here and there. So if it comes up, there will be a line added into the next rulebook update that says a unit cannot have more than one activation token. Because at the moment, there's no rule that says that.
Yeah.
Which is silly.
Yeah, these are preview rules. They're still going through all their final stuff, and they're out there to give you an idea of how the game works, but any kind of extra reinforcement on rules concepts like not multiple activation tokens is
so
something.
You can't have a whole bunch of Scourges come up with their Wrecking Claws and just go to like a single heavy and be like, you have 15 activation tokens. So of the two cortexes.
So the two cortexes are really interesting. So the killer cortex says if this destroys a model with a melee attack, it can move 2 inches. So that lets it possibly Pac-Man through a unit to get to where it needs to go, or hit something and run away if it killed it.
Because it can trigger more than once.
Yeah. There's no duration on this. It's not after. It says when this model destroys one or more enemy models with a melee attack, immediately after.
You can walk up and Wrecking Claw somebody and then Force Rod somebody else.
And then the Revenger has Smart Lock, and it's a charge ability. So when it's charged, it ignores cover when making range attacks.
So basically, your two Cortex options are: am I building a melee focus, or am I building a range focus?
But you can always put range weapons and melee weapons in a mix on a thing, and the claw is always there. So even on the Revenger, it's still going to have a big, powerful melee weapon if it needs it.
Well, let's talk about those weapons real fast and go through what they do.
So the only other melee option this model has is the Force Rod on its arm.
At the moment.
At the moment, yeah. There's other stuff in those stretch goals that you can see from the little preview image of the concept art. So there are going to be other things. But right now, in the starter box, it's got a Force Rod, which has the repulsor rule, which I believe that you like from that shield we were talking about earlier.
The one on the Firebrand's a little bit different, but yes, this is I bop you just flat out like no charge required, no spike required.
It just works.
I hit you, I slam you. As written, it's not optional.
No. So it says when this model hits.
Yeah, before damage is rolled, the model
is slammed.
Yeah, so be careful. Unless that changes, and these are playtest documents, and things could change. This could end up saying can. But at the moment, Force Rod is you hit somebody and you send them flying. So if you're going to hit them with other things like your giant crab claw, do that first.
Claw them first.
So that you don't bop them out of your melee range.
Yeah. And this is a PAL 3 range 1. It's pretty basic stats for the rest of its
It just has
stuff.
slam at all times.
But the fact that it can slam things, especially if you get somebody up against a piece of scenery, and you can get that extra damage on the slam.
Yeah, or just throw them off a building.
Yeah.
Throwing people off buildings is how you should play this game.
Throwing people off buildings is pretty awesome. Unfortunately, Hungerford walked back up the building yesterday that I threw him off of.
Yeah.
But so the Void Spitter is its small gun arm option.
Yeah, it's small POW 4 gun.
Yeah, I just mean small visually. It's also short range. It's basically a pistol. It's only range 8.
Just a Warjack pistol.
Yeah. But when it declares an attack with this weapon, it can spike to cause the weapon to become a spray.
And I love sprays in this game. Again, I feel like every unit you take, you want to have a dedicated role in mind of what this thing is supposed to do. And I was talking about my Firebrands, the way I build them to protect points, and how I like to use the Paladin Enforcer squads as my volume of fire. Weapons like this are volume of fire weapons. weapons.
Yeah.
Sprays can do just a massive amount of damage.
The other thing I really like about this is with that killer Cortex, now you would be giving up the Force Rod, but if you walk up and you crab claw a warrior model to death, then you can shift a couple inches and line up that spray that your opponent might have been like, oh, you have a spray option, I'm going to put my models like this. And you're like, well, I knock that guy out of the way and I step over and then I spray those guys.
Yeah,
and that optional spray is really awesome. Then we're going to the shoulders.
The shoulders are where it's at, in my opinion, on the Scourges.
So this is the first one, the long cannon in the art, the holophage cannon. It's cost 3, so it's beefy.
It's range 14, POW 4.
But it's range 14, POW 4, and it has corrosion, which is just always on.
Yes.
A model hit by this attack gets the corrosion continuous effect. And in continuous effect corrosion, if you haven't looked at the rules, it gives you -1 armor while you have it.
Yes.
And then at the end of the pulse round, when you roll the white die, it either goes away if it's a blank, or it does that much damage to you if it's a strike. And that's double strike does 2 damage.
There will be an update you'll be seeing coming to the rules very soon. It's not 100% locked in place, but imagine for now that the rules will end up saying something like the minimum armor you can have is 1.
Yeah.
There is.
Things don't drop you to 0 armor.
Because if you end up getting
breaks.
Yeah, if you get dropped to 0 armor and someone does a damage roll.
How do math?
So
this is awesome, like throwing out corrosion to drop the armor on something like your crazy firebrand with double shields, or whatever, or just if you're fighting against some other really solid model that you need to plink away at.
And we're talking about the firebrand with double shields, but I'll tell you what I really love. And we're not talking about them today on the stream, but the Morning Star.
Are you talking about the Morning Star with double shields?
Morning Star with double shields is just
because the Morning Star has 2 shoulder mounts. So it gets even more offensive power.
Just chef's kiss. I think every Jack I run in Iron Star, literally every Jack will have double shields.
Your deal is just shields all the time?
I've played enough Dark Souls, okay?
Okay, so just like the Dusk Wolf, there's a Rocket Pod shoulder option. Range 12, POW 4, blast weapon. So what you'd expect a Rocket Pod to do. Yeah. But you can double Rocket Pod this thing. It costs 2. So if you put Rocket Pods on both shoulders, then you've got a whole lot of blasts you can throw out there.
You unfortunately can't double cannon.
No, the holophage is cost 3, so you can't double holophage, but you can double rocket pod.
You can double rocket pod, and that's again if you're doing the kind of build you would want to do the Cortex that lets you ignore cover and all those good things, and you would just be like, what does this Scourge do? This Scourge kills infantry.
Yeah, or you could still do the killer. You could still do the killer.
You could, but if you were going double rocket pod shoulders,
you probably want to ignore cover with those rocket pods, and then just a super basic option in case you need it.
You got a point. You can spend it.
The Nailer, which is the same gun carried by the Vassal Reavers, sorry, the infantry squad in that box. It's just a machine gun. It's a POW 10, range 10, POW 3 machine gun. That's just a 1-point shoulder option.
Anthony Martinez says on Facebook, I think you've just convinced me to switch to ISA Hungerford, play it as a corporate security force. 100%.
Oh, yeah.
I plan on painting mine like cops with like black lacquered armor.
You're going to put like RoboCop like flashing lights on their head?
No.
RoboCop 3? Is it RoboCop 3 where he has all the like crazy police flashing lights and stuff?
It is RoboCop 3.
You should totally do a RoboCop 3 theme with your paladins and put lights and sirens on their heads.
I will not.
Do it.
I will not.
Okay, so that's the Warjack. And remember, that's the 5 weapon options that are in the starter box right now. There are extra weapon options that are stretch goals, and we'll talk about those later.
So looking at the Vassal Reavers as the mainline infantry you'll get in the starter box, and if we compare them again, if I said like the Paladin Enforcers are kind of like the median, right? So we see something very similar to the median. Same speed, mat, rat, def, but not armor.
Yeah.
So we see immediately, if we look at what the median is considered, that Vassal Reavers are less armored, so they have to obviously do something else.
But they trade a little bit for that armor.
They do.
They trade stealth when they're charged. So it's an entire infantry squad that you can't shoot from more than 8 inches away, unless you spike to ignore stealth with your paladins. So there's a little bit of that rock, paper, scissors. Which way am I going with this? They're speed 6, and they can spike to move through obstructions and other models.
Yes.
So they can ghost through things.
Yes.
So these, whereas the Marcher Worlds have the spike tab move 3 more inches, that doesn't help you if there's a wall in your way. That will let you get maybe a little farther around the edge of that wall. But these guys can just move 6 inches straight through anything that's in their way.
And I feel like this is another reason that you really need to play Warcaster with 3D terrain, and I really recommend that you have a decent density of terrain, because if you play on a giant flat board with a couple forests, an old hill that you were about to throw away, and some like ponds, that phase sequencer ability is okay. Like you get to move through other models, which is nice.
Yeah.
But if you're playing on like a cityscape or inside like a spaceship or like on a dense ice planet, it's got icebergs everywhere, or even like a forest planet that has legitimately forests and trees everywhere. A big part of Continuum is so many of them have the phase sequencer and an ability like that. They have the ability to just walk through walls like ghosts. And you want to build terrain that doesn't necessarily just straight advantage them for being able to do so, but at least promotes the ability and says, we're going to have a fair fight, and this is one of your skills.
Yeah. So they have that same nailer, the range 10, POW 3, submachine gun kind of thing.
Yep.
But then they have their fusion saws, which are range 1, POW 5 melee weapons.
Do we know what kind of fusion it is yet?
It's the best kind of fusion.
Killy fusion?
Sure.
Okay. I know it was like a cold fusion saw.
I don't know if you were making a food joke there.
No, I wasn't.
Okay. No. But these are the melee attacking force.
They have a POW 5 weapon.
They have POW 5 melee weapons, and they can walk through walls. And then they have MAT 3, like we said, which is a pretty standard.
POW 5 is the same POW as the fusion glaive from the Fire brand.
Yeah.
So each one of these bros hits as hard as a Firebrand's giant sword, which is pretty legit.
Okay, so now we're going to go on to the Immortal Weaver.
Yep, we're going to move on to the Immortal Weaver. So every box, of course, is getting a Weaver.
And there's a alt male sculpt Weaver that's in the stretch goals that we've unlocked.
There is.
So now there's 2 Weaver options for that army, and I believe that everybody who backs at whatever level gets that model as a bonus. But Jeff Hanley can answer that in the chat. Okay, so their Weaver has Arc Relay 13, so it's a little bit better.
It's a weird number
than the Paladin. It has a charge for +5, so it's range 18, so it's the biggest range Weaver in the game. And it has Slip Displacer Spike, so it can move 3 inches if it's spiked.
Which is a big deal.
Which is a big deal.
Being able to get your Weaver into the exact position that you need to, because you're going to be sending most Furies out at 18 inches. The thing's moving 6, and you can spike for another 3. So you're looking at 27 inches of threat on most.
But more importantly, when you're talking about tables that have real amounts of terrain on them, those vectors are what you're going for. Because like you hid your Paladin commander behind that bunker in that game yesterday, and then you were by the pipes in that one thing, and I shifted my hunter around behind you to get a clear shot with no cover. And that's a really important element of the game, is that there should be things in the way in some positions on the table, so that extra movement will let you get past that blocking thing or whatever.
But the other really, really big thing about this is that it's got a spray weapon.
Yeah, it's got another range 8 POW 4 spray weapon. It doesn't have to spike 4. It just always has a spray weapon.
And spray weapons, again, volume of fire is really strong, especially when you can put 1 arc on this and then have it hit as many targets as that spray can possibly hit, especially with its speed and the ability to spike and hit those different vectors. And then spray down the line. It's just, it may not have all the immediate tricks that you see on the Alliance Weaver, but it has a lot of potential. Travis says, how do I know which head goes to which cortex on the Dusk Wolf and other Warjacks? I believe that...
So there's pieces of art associated with all the rules.
Yeah.
So the renders and stuff are going to be along... You guys haven't seen fully laid out cards yet, and we're going to probably preview something like that soonish. But the heads and all the weapons and stuff are associated with whatever rule they have. So like, we know that the neural net cortex is like the splinter cell, like multiple circles on the helmet thing.
Right.
But that's going to be on the cards, a piece of art that shows that.
Yeah, and if you're somebody out there who's a reviewer, for example, who may have gotten early copies of some of the Warjacks, we've seen some people doing like YouTube blogs and stuff like that, and you have a question, just contact the people here at Privateer that sent you the model in the first place, probably Jeff Hanley, and they'll be able to answer that question for you.
Yeah.
And then Cheddar Caveman says, what is the focus stat on Weaver? It's how many white dice you roll whenever you make a Fury attack.
Oh, but it's 4 like standard in the starter boxes.
Yeah.
But that is what that stat does.
Oh no, it's on there. He was just asking what is that stat? It's basically their mat or rat when making a Fury attack.
Yeah.
It's how many white dice.
Yeah, you don't add red dice on the model to cipher attack rolls. but you add all the dice in your well, which means you can roll 7 red dice on an attack if you want, if you have no arc in play, which doesn't happen all that often. But if you need to really, 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 really hit something as hard as possible with a Fury attack, then you could have a whole bunch of dice in your well.
And then the last model in the Continuum starter, and probably the most important model,
my favorite too,
would be the Marauder.
Yeah, the person in the Karchez armor.
He's in Karchez armor.
Yeah.
This
he's
model
more than likely just a ribcage and a face.
Just gets work done. So
where everybody else in this is kind of sneaky and kind of weird, this is just a straightforward, big, beefy, threatening thing.
So let's just talk about it.
So speed 5, so it's slower than everything else you've got in this force.
But Mat Rat 4, that's light warjack level.
Higher. Def 2, so it's not going to dodge very much, but it's got arm 4, so it's trading a def for an arm when you're looking at average stats.
It's got 3 damage boxes. Again, it's got the same Mat and Rat as most light warjacks and the same damage and armor as some light warjacks. Most light warjacks start at 3. This thing is actually slightly tankier than most light warjacks, and it costs 1.
And it has weapon expert, so it can attack with all of its weapons.
Like a warjack.
But it's not a warjack because it can't have more than 1 arc.
Correct.
That's the defining thing about warjacks is you can put up to 3 arc on them, and this is still a solo, even though he's running around in almost a warjack body.
Yeah. Michael Johnson on Facebook says, are we saying Karchev armor?
No,
we're saying Karchez with a Z. It's totally different.
Yeah. Well, you know, over 5,000 years, I'm surprised the word Warcaster, you know, languages evolve.
Sure.
So the only reason it's still called Warcaster is because we're calling it Warcaster. In a real world situation over 5,000 years, a word would be almost unrecognizable.
But not a word with as much power behind it as Warcaster
does. Yeah. So Karchez, I'm sure that there's just been some accents and some weird misspellings in records when they were telling stories about Karchev the Terrible and how he saved the day. And they're like, yeah, Karchev's whatever turned into Karchez, and there you go.
So let's just talk about this.
So the impulse reactor charge is the thing about this model that's going to make it really shine on the table.
It's a part of it, in my opinion.
So it's a big, beefy, scary thing, almost like a warjack.
Yes.
Warjack can only activate once unless you do something special, like we showed yesterday with the Combat Engineer.
Yeah.
Or you play a card. If this model is charged, you can always remove its activation token. Now, you might not want to do that sometimes, because if you ever start a turn with all your models activated, you can strip all the activation tokens off by clearing them all. But this is just an unstoppable force of, I'm going to come at you every turn I need to and shoot you and punch you all the time. And it's going to take work to get rid of that model.
Yeah, and so the impulse reactor is what lets it always go, but I think it's the rest of the rules and its stats. Top to bottom, this is just a strong model. It gets to attack with both its weapons. It's got a strafe weapon, so it can technically hit 4 different things in one turn.
Yep, it's a range 12 POW 4 strafe weapon, so it's not insignificant.
That would cost like 2 points on a jack. And then it has a POW 4 melee weapon that you can spike to give systems failure to jacks.
Yeah, he's got like a snipper on there. He just like snips a wire, and their just arm stops working.
I think this thing is ridiculously strong.
Really are. Also,
I think it's so powerful.
These playtest rules say it's on a 30. It's actually on a 40 millimeter base. He's beefier than a 30. This is a typo that we're gonna fix. But yeah, but that's like we've said, that like there's ongoing conversations about some of these things, and this is the preview rules of playtest. And you know, this is a very powerful model. If you think it's a very powerful model, then agree with Hungerford.
Quetzalcoatl says, can a Marauder activate Spike, then activate again in the same turn? No, because it's at the start of your turn you would remove the activation token.
Yeah, it's not a spike to remove the activation token, it's a charge. So if it has an activation token on it at the start of your turn, you can remove the activation token from this model while it's charged. So yeah, you can't double activate it in the same round.
And I will tell you that Marauders seem very powerful, and they are meant to be a cornerstone of the faction. Talking to Jason Souls, who's the lead design and development on Warcaster, he definitely feels that Marauders are like a key piece in playing Continuum.
Well, especially when you're running around with the Vassal Reavers that have 2 armor. And the thing that's mostly keeping them alive is the fact that they can have stealth if you want them to.
If you can't ignore it.
Yeah, but if they don't have stealth and a blast hits one of them, the other ones are more than likely dead because they only have armor 2, and most blast weapons are 3 or 4 POW. So you're more than likely going to splatter all those models. So this model's the counterweight to that, of it's survivable and really solid, but it's not sneaky at all. It's just going to keep stomping towards you until you get rid of it.
It's as sneaky as Karchev the Terrible.
Yeah.
Karchev
the Terrible?
No, Karchev the
Karchev the Terrible?
Which is to say, not sneaky at all.
Not sneaky at all. Okay, so we're on to
Marcher Worlds.
Marcher Worlds. Can you read that?
No, they can't.
Not at all?
No.
Marcher Worlds.
So this is the faction you've been playing the most on the stream, but this is not the faction you're going to collect.
No, I am eagerly awaiting the moment someone gives me production continuum models that I can own forever.
All right.
Because I'm helping out. Like I'm gonna put together some models for the stream and paint some stuff and things like that. But those aren't my models yet, and they're not fully production level, so they're not going to be something I'm going to take to shows and is not going to maybe get broken or something.
Sure.
So I'm looking forward to getting these models in my hands for real.
For real.
And playing with them because I like trench coats and darkness.
So I feel that the Dusk Wolf embodies the Marcher Worlds playstyle and everything it does. So we've got normal Jack stats, though it has one higher armor, but it doesn't really have any shields it can take. But we see that it gets faster while it's charged. It can spike to move out of activation. One of its cortexes just flat out gives it Pathfinder, while the other one lets it ignore cover. Marcher Worlds are very hit and run guerrilla tactics, in my opinion.
And this thing becomes speed 8 when it's fully charged. It is no joke.
And then,
for mobility.
The Scout is both the Pathfinder and the charge to ignore cover. The Neural Net is the other one where it gets the higher defense.
Yeah.
For being around other friendly units up to a maximum of +3. So whereas you can stack a ton of armor on the Firebrand, situationally, you could just be a Def 6 Dusk Wolf running around in cover, ignoring the difficulty.
If there's a squad with you, you're really high defense. And then you can just run out away from that squad to get a job done when you need to.
And then spike back. Like if it has them move up to get in range, to take a couple shots, and then just spike backwards to be near the people you need to be. Or again, anytime that you can move outside of that normal one movement, you get an activation, it just changes those vectors. It's so powerful. But to me, the Dusk Wolf says, if you understand the rules of the game and you're like, what are Marcher Worlds play like? If you show them a Dusk Wolf card, it just says everything about the faction you need to know.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I really like about this game is we didn't put in a core running rule. No one can just double their speed and run really fast.
Yes.
Because gates and use of arc and cards and all those things are those repositioning, get your models where they need to be kind of thing.
Right. So we look at its weapons. Its baseline cheapest gun is really good.
It's the battle rifle that the fire team also carries. So range 12, POW 4 with the mechanical optics charge that says it can go up to range 16, which is pretty good.
Instead of having an assault rifle bayonet like Iron Star has, which lets it do the more attacks. This is just I get to shoot you from Narnia.
Yeah. And comboed with the railgun, which we're going to look at in a second, gives this thing a lot of threat range.
Let's just talk about the threat range on a Dusk Wolf. So let's say you've got 3 arc on it. So it walks 8, it spikes to go 11.
Yes.
Then it can shoot this at range 16.
Yeah.
Rocking just a flat out 27-inch threat range.
Yeah.
So if you're playing skirmish, and you're playing on a 30 by 30 board, and you aren't playing with a good amount of terrain.
You need to play with a good amount of terrain that blocks line of sight in this game, if you haven't noticed that by now.
It is literally possible on turn 1, if you have the cipher that says you can charge something as much as you want, to you go first, you play the cipher, you charge your Dusk Wolf up to 3, it activates from whatever bonus solo you're bringing. You walk up, and you kill, let's say you just go double battle rifle, something decent on the shoulder.
Rocket pod, probably?
We'd have to check the range. Probably double rifle railgun.
Well, yeah, double rifle railgun will give you a lot of range, but rocket pod will give you the extra blast to help take out a squad.
Yeah, so you just move up, spike, go further, then take...
Unload,
because you got Pathfinder and you're ignoring cover, and just like, you deployed a squad and some dude, that's cool. Put down your first gate. Like, spend your first turn not doing anything, and then put down a gate.
Yeah.
And then you better put 5 on it and hope I don't get over there.
So the moral of the story is scenery.
And deploy smart.
Put down terrain.
If you see Dusk Wolves, get ready because they're shooting you right there. Talk about its melee weapon.
The Ripper, the chainsaw it can have on its arm, is super basic. It's a POW 4 melee weapon.
So,
but you can double up with these, so you can have 2 melee weapons and still have a gun on your shoulder.
The reason you take Rippers is if the Cypher deck you're building wants to use melee attacks on jacks.
Because there is a Cypher card that says make an immediate melee attack with the jack. It plays out of activation, so you can just punch something.
If you are not playing, if you don't build a Cypher deck that gets or have a force that gets anything out of melee attacks on jacks, in my opinion, there is no reason not to take a battle rifle.
Yeah.
It's the same POW. If the type of attack it is doesn't matter to you, if it's melee or range, then that's irrelevant to you. And the ballistic versus kinetic, that's more about what your opponent's doing in terms of what they might be able to get armor against, who knows. But like, there's no reason not to just potentially have the range 16 POW 4 attack versus the range 1 POW 4 attack. So if you're taking Rippers, plan to use them. Otherwise, why?
Well, chainsaws are their own reward, in my personal opinion. Okay, so the flamethrower is the next weapon.
Hashtag.
I love the flamethrower. I love sprays in general in this game.
Yeah, no, this thing's great. It's a spray 10.
So it's a spray 10 POW 3 that automatically causes fire. And like we said with corrosion's -1 armor and maybe damage. Fire is -1 mat and rat and maybe damage. So if you have something that you're scared of attacking you and you can light it on fire, it will be possibly just distracted enough to miss you a bunch of times. And this just does it. And you can put 2 of these. There's no 1-point shoulder, but you can put 2 flamethrowers on your Dusk Wolf and just light the world on fire.
So for my Dusk Wolves, if I want to go heavy on the shoulder gun, then I'm doing the double battle rifle. Right?
Yeah.
That's something I plan to use the gun. I'm more worried about using the gun, and this is going to be a heavier target. I'm shooting Marauders, I'm shooting other light warjacks.
Yeah.
If I want to make an infantry mulcher, double flamethrower all the way over the sky. Like, your speed with the arc on it and then the spike to move, you can just go so far up the field, and then even if you spike to move and you had 3 arc to begin with, you still have 2 arc left on you for getting 2 red dice on your Rat 4, on 2 spray 10s. This thing will just walk up and just be like, it's like the fire bat from StarCraft, and you just lay waste to everything.
It can't do this, though.
It can't do that.
It can only do this. Some of these options.
Now, the next weapon.
Do this rest of the show. The Talon rocket pod.
Not everyone agrees with. That's how I like to do it. But another way to build the anti-infantry, anti-solo build is the Talon. Go double Talon rocket pods. With the blast weapons, you can shoot people.
Well, you can't go double Talon rocket pods. They're your shoulder option.
Oh, they are shoulder.
They only have 1 mount. Now, the heavies have 2 mounts, and some of the weapons on the lights are also on the heavies.
You can go rocket pod flamethrower.
Yes.
And then leave your other weapon as the assault rifle.
Yeah.
And is that better, like a better way of doing it? Because I kind of like double flamethrower.
Double flamethrower is awesome.
Because
this is range 12 blast.
It is range 12 blast, but personally, I think you just get more people with the sprays. But what I was getting at was the argument is that you can go rocket pod flamethrower battle rifle, right? And then you're getting a blast, the shot that's at range 16, and then the flamethrower. And it just kind of comes down to your personal preference of which way you want to build the jack. I think they're both good. I just like the 2 10-inch sprays myself.
Yeah. The other thing about it is, since the rules say you can take 4 of any one named thing, so 4 Dusk Wolves, for example, you can do all the different options you really want and put what you need in play when you need it. If your opponent has suddenly flooded the board with 3 squads or something, and they're all in this tight area, and you're like, my double flamethrower Dusk Wolf pops out and burns everyone to death. Or if your opponent's playing a farther range game where they're popping shots at you from across the table with something important, then you can have that double battle rifle railgun Dusk Wolf that can come out and duel that model from a long distance away.
The reason I think I like double flamethrower more is because by the nature of the game, people are going to end up putting more squads out of gates. So as they get summoned, they will just be clumped up. Like there is a phase where things just have to get clumped up around each other, and then they have to move out from there. So you know that spray weapons and blast weapons will always have those good opportunities. I just think the sprays in those situations get
But
more.
if you go back and look at our game from yesterday, there's that alley in the middle between the Art Geyser mining rig thing and that square bunker, where there's just a lot of stuff happening for a little while. There was a bunch of models clumped together, and
those have been great.
Flamethrowers, we might have hit your own models a little bit, but whatever. And then the last of these weapons is the railgun. The range 18 POW 5 spike to drop your opponent's armor by 1 railgun Costs 3, so it's the hefty, expensive thing in the starter box. But range 18 is not a joke.
Move 8, spike 3 for 11.
Range 18.
Range 29 threat with this thing. If you're doing the Dusk Wolf battle rifle trick, right? It's a 30 by 30 board.
It's also potentially a 48 by 48
board. Oh, sure.
But in skirmish mode, the railgun, you can't hide from the railgun unless you have a bunch of 3D terrain.
Yes. All right, so let's quickly go through
now
the rest of the stuff.
The warriors in there. So we've seen a lot of the Ranger Fire Team in games, but we haven't seen one of their go-to weapons.
The null detonators.
The null detonators we haven't really shown off yet. They're range 6 and they're effectively anti-arc grenades. They don't do any damage, but if you hit something with them, they take an arc off. And you can throw 3 of them in a turn because you have 3 models. So if these guys are close-ish, within 12 inches of a gate, you can potentially take that gate off even if it has a lot of arc on it. But you have to be careful that you don't fall into some trap. Your opponent doesn't like put a gate out there with a bunch of arc on it just to lure these guys over there so they can null detonator it, and then you're like, haha, you fell into my trap.
Yeah, you've activated my trap card.
Then they have a slip displacer, that pretty core Marcher Worlds thing where they can spike to move.
Yep.
They have the mechanical optics on their guns, so plus 4 range, so they're up to range 16, POW 4 guns.
Unlike the Jacks, you can't spike to move and then shoot with the extra range because they can only have 1 arc on them.
Yeah.
So you don't have that benefit that the Jacks do.
And then they have tiny little fusion blades, just little knives that are POW 3 melee weapons in case they need them for something.
Yeah, and it's very, it's a backup. This is only going to come up if some kind of card or ability has been played that really shuts down the range weapons or gives somebody ridiculous armor against ballistic or something like that. That's really the only reason you're going to.
Which there are rules, like we've been playtesting out farther than what people have seen. So there are things that like, everyone knows there's a lot of weapon types and damage types in this game. Like there's beam damage and there's explosion damage and there's ballistic damage. So there are things that directly counter those keywords. So you might need to knife something. It just might happen.
I saw on Facebook, Jeremy Davis was talking about, he said, don't squads have to be within 2 inches of each other? That would make blast and sprays auto-clued, in my opinion. The blast is that you hit the person, and if you hit them, you hit the 2 nearest models. So yes, they do have to be within 2 inches of each other, but one model gets summoned within 1 inch of the gate, and the other 2 go off that. Depending on who you hit, you may end up hitting the gate with a blast weapon as well.
Or a friendly model of your own that's closer, because that can happen.
So it does require some positioning, and sprays, again, based on how they come out of the gate, they can try and triangulate it to not give you a great shot. And that's why you bring 2 flamethrowers.
And remember, we're not talking about a wedge spray, we're talking about a line. You draw a line out to the range of the weapon, and that's everything it hits.
Yeah.
So you can hope to get that line across multiple models, but if your opponent staggers their models in certain ways, you have to dance around to try and get those sprays.
Yeah, and the best
that's kind of why I like the blast option and the spray option. Like putting the rocket pod and the flamethrower and a battle rifle or a ripper on that Dusk Wolf so that it can hit clumped up squads farther away and it can try to spray things close up and it can use its other weapon for whatever it needs to do.
The reason I like the double flamethrower with the Dusk Wolf is because it can spike to move 3.
Yeah.
So you can line up the first shot and then spike and move and then do the second shot. It's so good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a Coalition Weaver.
So this is the 3rd Weaver. It's range 10, it's the shortest range Weaver, and it has the charge for +5 range, so they all have that.
But it has a very powerful spike ability.
But it has a really powerful spike ability because it can spike to put the card you just played back in your hand, which means you can play the same Fury card twice in the same turn, which is real good because there's a slamming Fury, there's a freezing Fury that puts activation tokens on stuff, there's a Fury that lights fires. Like there's so many Furies that using twice in a round is really awesome.
Yeah, it's super, super strong, and we didn't see anything like this on any of the other other Weavers.
Now the fact that being able to manipulate arc is really powerful, having a built-in spray attack and stealth is really powerful, but just saying, I hit you with this card, I put that card back in my hand and I'm gonna hit you with it in a second, one more time, is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Also by spiking, the second shot will be better because you'll have that extra arc in your well for that attack roll that you didn't have the first time.
Correct.
So yeah, there's a lot of options for this model that are really awesome. And I tried to pull this off yesterday. I did stack my deck with all 6 of the Fury cards to try and get, and I cast a lot of spells yesterday. But I didn't ever have the perfect situation where I was like, I want to take this card and put it back. Because I generally had 2 and there was lots of options and that kind of stuff. And then it has a pistol and it has Repulsor on its battle staff.
Yeah.
So it can just bop you and slam you around.
It's also Def 4.
It's also Def 4.
Pretty
so
good.
it's a pretty solid def. And then this is in the starter box. This is probably my favorite model. I kept activating it yesterday. I've used it a lot. The Hunter is a sniper with some dodgy mobility shenanigans. The standout stat on this model is Rat 6.
Yeah.
Nothing else in the game has anywhere near a rat as high as this. Yeah. And that reflects the fact that it wants to headshot you. So if it gets that really, really, really good attack roll, it gets a bunch of damage on the damage roll.
And the fact that it always shoots and moves.
It always shoots and moves, and it doesn't have to hit to move. It's after you resolve a ranged attack, you can move 3 inches for free. It's not a spike ability. Yeah. So the Hunter is going to fire and fade back into cover or whatever, or fire and go up to securing a point,
right,
or any of those things you need that Hunter to do. So they're really, really mobile models that have a range 15 POW 4 that can spike to drop your armor by 1, just like the railgun.
And speaking of the railgun, this thing has a similar ability. It can spike to lower your armor.
Yeah.
It's range 15, not quite 18.
Yeah.
It's POW 4,
yeah,
not quite. The railgun's 5.
The railgun is POW 5.
Yeah.
But it also has Mimetic Cloak that if you're charged, you have stealth. Which we saw in the game yesterday. I had it stealth sometimes.
The penultimate sniper, and it's interesting. When you look at the solos available, I think if you're a continuing player, you're going to want multiple Marauders.
Yeah, you're going to probably want at least 2.
If you're playing Alliance, you actually have a pretty good variety of solos you're going to end up wanting to pick from, but having Enforcers and some extra Weavers is good. And then for Marcher Worlds, I think you just have options, but I think you're always going to reach for 1 or 2 Hunters.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, you just want to have them in the backfield camping objectives and just popping people off.
And their speed 7, the one thing the Hunter does not excel at is surviving.
No.
2 armor with 1 hit point means
don't put it up.
The Hunter is going to get popped pretty easily if anything actually hits it. And that's where blast weapons are really, really dangerous, because even if you miss,
you still roll the white dice.
You still make the damage roll on the target that you were aiming at. So Hunters don't usually survive blast attacks unless the attack roll is just bad.
So I know we've gone a little bit over an hour at this point, and thanks for hanging out with us. We just wanted to kind of talk about what you were going to be picking up in your command starters and what our thoughts were on it, and see what you all think as well.
And we've talked about all this kind of stuff during the games, but it's hard to really focus on.
It's hard to deep dive.
Well, it's hard to focus on your thoughts when you're trying to keep the game going and interact with the chat and all that stuff. So we wanted to take a moment to just talk through how we see the models and what they do in the game in a setting that wasn't about anything else.
Yeah, and we hope that, maybe if you were looking at these rules, you learned something. Maybe you learned a combo or an idea you hadn't thought of before. Maybe a Jack customization build you maybe hadn't considered. We wanted to have this conversation to stoke your imagination and let you start thinking about these models and which faction you might be picking up. So speaking of which, as a reminder, everybody, if you're still on the fence, the Kickstarter is still live. We just hit another funding goal during the stream.
Wojtek Sudal and his null detonators.
So I would say
another spoiler.
It is another spoiler.
Yeah.
Go check it out if you haven't. And then if you want to see some more painting of Warcaster models and you want to ask about color schemes or any tips and tricks, come join us on Get Your Paint On tomorrow with Jordan Land at 10 a.m. And we will see you all next time. Goodbye.
Are you going to be the voice tomorrow? Have we discussed it?
I don't think I've been asked.